So we're going to go into more detail about ideation. Now, if you remember, you've got, based on your idea, you have 4 different ways to look for ideas. So in terms of product offering, what about the law? That I'm a law firm. And so the first part is to think about, okay, product marketing operations. Can't do much about the market because the demand for lawyers is, pretty consistent. You don't create new demand for it. And operations, law firms operate the way they do. You might be able to streamline it. So what is the nature? And that's the thing. There's always 2 things that you do when you look at an idea. Look at the value chain. Look at the nature of the game they're playing. The game of law is about knowledge and evidence. It's also about game theory, figuring out what someone else is going to do. So when we look at the value chain, where do you have opportunity? And it's basically in this area of charging and defending. And so what if you could find a way using AI to do simulations that input the evidence that you have and basically have it map out and predict how is the other side going to respond to you, and simulate cases ahead of time. Plus they could tell you if you're going to win or if you're going to lose. What this does is differentiate you from everyone else. Now, what about the market of interest? So it's gap, niches, or differentiation. The market approach to cancer is what is the nature of cancer. So we're going to pick the cancer market. And that's that you have diagnosis, therapy, and recovery. However, cancer typically involves invasive procedures. What if you could come up with something non-invasive, something that will give you early warning? And so one approach is dogs have been known to be able to smell cancer. So using gas or contact sensors, like in your Fitbits or your iWatches, how about a smell sensor that tells you that you're contracting cancer? Now, how do you make money out of this? Well, short-term disposables, because the problem with sensors, especially smell sensors, is they'll foul after a while. So if you could put something that's easily can be flipped in and out, this is a possibility. Now, what about technology? I have a zero thermal expansion ceramic. And what this does is when you heat it up, things expand. This doesn't expand. It has zero expansion. What can we use it for? And so I need to find a problem for my solution. The nature of this is thermal. So we look at push, pull, power and transportation, trends, harvesting. And so you can use this as part of a material to recapture waste heat from internal combustion cars. You can use it for power plants that waste a lot of heat. Basically anything related to heat. This could be part of something that recaptures the heat and brings it back in. Now, global warming. This is now your opinion of global warming, these are the hard facts. And this is how CO2 has changed over time. And this is what's freaking people out. The planet itself has never been able to create this much CO2 before. And so part of the thinking is, well, mankind can't affect the planet. And that's not true. The ozone layer. Back in the 1970s, the world got together and they realized they were punching a hole in the ozone layer. And there was plenty of evidence of it. And some people said it was a hoax. Some people said, if we spend all our time, so they were saying we need to get rid of CFCs, chlorofluorohydrocarbons. And everybody said, oh no, if we do that, that's going to hurt the semiconductor industry. It's going to hurt a lot of industries. We're going to lose a ton of money. Oh no. And I was working in the semi industry when this was going on. But the world got together and passed something called the Montreal Protocols. And the entire world started getting rid of its CFCs. And it worked. It took 30 years. I mean, everybody said, well, it took a long time. Think about the scale of the planet. It is going to take a long time. But when you compare that to evolution and other planetary mechanisms, 30 years is not very long. And they finally have concrete evidence that the ozone hole is closing. Mankind can affect the planet. The past had more polluters, yeah, but you never had this many people before. And this is what's making the big difference. This is why Thanos, wanted to click half of the people away. Maybe the heating's coming up through solar cycles and all. And if you go through the calculations, and I actually have, there's no correlation. And these time scales of solar cycles and all are hard to predict. So what goes on? When the world gets hot, CO2 is produced. And so heat comes first, and then CO2 lags behind it. What's happening is a reverse reaction. And this is why at first I didn't believe in global warming until I looked at the data and did my calculations myself. My general opinion is we're screwed. But anyway, what happens is that CO2 goes up higher, and then you see the heat. The reverse reaction is taking place, which means CO2 is creating the heat. And this is where we're getting record cold and heat. And so what solutions can we come up with? But what it comes down to is how do we recapture the CO2? And then once you recapture the CO2, how are you going to sequester it? And so that's a big challenge for that. For business, electric cars. The big problem for electric cars right now is getting into the early majority. We want a great car and we don't want to have to pay for it. That is the primary truth of all customers. They want everything and they don't want to pay for it. Cost in cars, though, is driven by scale. And so it's chicken and the egg. Do I make a lot of cars and I can sell it? Or do I wait for demand and then I can make more cars? The thing about the electric car is when you go through it, the entire game of the electric car is the battery. And so if you can make a battery for cheaper with higher capacity, all of a sudden the cost in the electric car stops to drop very quickly. This is one of the drawbacks of the BYD car. Yeah, it's cheaper, but the range is a lot less. Not only that, but I rented a couple of cars a couple of summers ago. Or was it? No, it was last summer. And I found out the electric car isn't quite what everybody thinks it is. First of all, it doesn't drive all that better than a combustion engine car. The biggest advantage to it is that you don't pollute the atmosphere. And not only that, but you don't pay as much money in maintenance costs. And so what goes on with the electric car is they tell you try not to charge. You can charge your battery very quickly up to 80%, but the last 20% has to be trickle charged. And they don't recommend that you take your battery up over 90% like a lot of rechargeable batteries. And what they also tell you is that when it goes down, no, you don't go down to zero. You have to bring it down to 10 or 20%. So all of a sudden, now you only have anywhere from 60 to 80% of the total capacity of the battery. So what are some of the challenges? Well, one thing you can do is energy harvesting. And one group came up with this idea, and I thought it was a good idea. You know the sun shields on cars? Why not make them solar panels? And what they found out is that, yeah, you don't get that much power, but you can recharge your battery up to 25%. That's significant. For example, you go to school, and when you come back, you get an extra quarter tank of gas. Wouldn't you want to do that if it's not costing you anything? And so when we look at the costs of, how do we bring the cost of solar down? A lot of it is they keep focusing on the panel, but the labor, design, and permits is what drives the cost of it. The other thing is, what they don't tell you is there's only 4 to 5 hours of peak sun per day. In a 3,000 square foot home, you need 9 kilowatts. And all of a sudden, it's a lot more expensive than you think, because how much are you really saving? Maybe $150 to $250 a month. And so all of a sudden, your payback is 10 to 13 years, unless you have subsidies. And that's why they have subsidies. What it comes down to is, for industry, you want 7 years of payback on a project like this. And 10 to 13 years is a no-go. Battery lifetime grew 80% with lithium, but battery life of devices went up 300%. The biggest solution we've had is smart power systems. It hasn't been the battery. Why? Your cell phone lasts longer and all. It's been the systems, because basically now your phone shuts down any unnecessary systems than what you need to save money. Can we have microgrids? Like, can you and your neighbors get together and decide to create your own little solar farm from lawn to lawn or roof to roof? And what it comes down to is, if mounting is the big deal, then can you come up with low-cost mounting where anybody can do it? For example, for those of you who ever put up a Starlink, and I did, and let me tell you, it was scary as hell, because I have a heights problem, and I'm going up to the roof of what's the equivalence of a 3rd floor, and but I was able to put it up and adjust it easily. And what they did is they came up with very good mounting for it. Some quick shots of some other technologies in terms of renewable energy. ASU has invested in algae, and the problem with algae is you just can't get enough of it. However, you need something that can grow very easily, and that's why people look at things like bamboo and hemp. Hemp, for all intents and purposes, it's a weed. And weeds you just can't stop. And bamboo is a dominant plant growth or tree growth. They're literally pictures of bamboo growing up through like large trees that they can just split it in half. And so bamboo is very easy to grow. You don't want it on your property because it'll kill everything around it. So can we find a way to tap into that? Autonomous driving. I honestly believe that autonomous driving, it probably won't happen in my lifetime, for the simple reason there's so many corner cases in driving. I don't know if it's necessarily going to do better than what we humans can do. And one thing that's total BS is they said, but it performs 10 times better than, internal combustion cars. It's not an apples to apples comparison, meaning that electric car has every safety feature in it. You need to compare that. When you compare it to ICE cars, you're talking about every car, and it doesn't have all the safety features. I have a 2025 RAV4, and all the safety features on it really impresses me. And it does make a difference in your driving. Guns, can we make a way to make them safe with better technology so that if somebody gets your gun, they can't fire it because it's yours? And that's the problem with a lot of these school shootings and all. These kids aren't getting guns off the street. They're getting guns off their parents or a neighbor or something like that. How about if VR gets better, if the vision gets better of using it? For people who have, like many of you, who want to take a class in the United States through VR, you can see what it's actually like. And then cybersecurity, there's always a need for it because things are always mutating. And cybersecurity is pretty interesting right now. because what it has in the code are basically like white blood cells, where it's just looking for things that's not supposed to be there, and then it gloms onto it and neutralizes it. When you think about the future, what do you think it's going to be? Do you think technology in abundance, and like these I shouldn't call them crackpots, but a lot of these so-called billionaires keep talking about, like Musk, for example, how in 5 years we won't have to work anymore because AI is going to create so much abundance that we won't need to work, and the wealth it'll create will just be able to pay everybody. So what scenario is that? That's Star Trek. If you believe that technology will create an abundance, or do you believe that we're going to run out of stuff? And what it means is that now the world becomes like Mad Max, where it's dog eat dog, and the world just feeds on each other. Personally, I believe it's going to be Mad Max, but I'm cynical. One thing that is really sad is we have so much technology and we have so many problems. Why aren't we using it? What it comes down to, and what you're going to see, is it's all about will. We got to the moon and back on a computer 1,000 times less than your cell phone. And how did we do it? We had will. And so that brings us to the end of technology. I hope you come up with really great ideas, and these are some techniques to help you along.